A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, Chapter 9 of the third book. The book is called The Track of a Storm. This chapter is called The Game Made. While Sidney Carton and the sheep of the prisons were in the adjoining dark room, speaking so low that not a sound was heard, Mr. Lorry looked at Jerry in considerable doubt and mistrust. That honest tradesman's manner of receiving the look did not inspire confidence. He changed the leg on which he rested, as often as he had 50 of those limbs, and were trying them all. He examined his fingernails with a questionable closeness of attention, and whenever Mr. Lorry's eye caught his, he was taken with that peculiar kind of short cough requiring a hollow of a hand before it, which is seldom, if ever, known to be an infirmity attendant on perfect openness of character. An infirmity attendant on perfect openness of character. "Jerry," said Mr. Lorry, "come here." Mr. Cruncher came forward sideways, with one of his shoulders in advance of him. "What have you been besides a messenger?" After some cogitation, accompanied with an intent look at his patron, Mr. Cruncher conceived the luminous side of replying, "Agricultural character." "My mind misgives me much," said Mr. Lorry, angrily shaking a forefinger at him, "that you have used the respectable and great house of Tellson's as a blind, and you have had an unlawful occupation of an infamous description. If you have, don't expect me to befriend you when you get back to England. If you have, don't expect me to keep your secret. Tellson's shall not be imposed upon." "I hope, sir," pleaded the ambushed Mr. Cruncher, "that a gentleman like yourself, when I've had the honour of odd jobbing till I'm grey at it, would think twice about harming me, even if it was so. I don't say it is, but even if it was, which it is to be took into account, that if it was, it wouldn't, even then, be all o' one side. There'd be two sides to it. There might be medical doctors at the present hour, picking up their guineas where an honest tradesman don't pick up his fardens, no, nor yet his half-fardens, and half-fardens, no, nor yet his quarter, banking away like smoke at Tellson's, cocking their medical eyes at that tradesman on the sly, going in and going out to their own carriages, equally like smoke, if not more so. Well, that'd be imposing too on Tellson's, for you cannot sauce the goose and not the gander, and here's Mr. Cruncher, or leastways was in the old English times, and would be tomorrow, if cause given, a-flopping again. The business of that degree is ruinating, stark ruinating, whereas them medical doctors' wives don't flop, catch 'em at it, or if they flop, their floppings go is in favour of more patients, and how can you rightly have one without t'other? Then, what with undertakers, and what with parish clerks, and what with sextons, and what with private watchmen, all avarices, and all in it. A man wouldn't get much by it, even if it was so, and what little a man did get would never prosper with him, Mr. Lorry. He'd never have no good of it. He'd want all along to be out of the line, if he could see his way out, being once, even if it was so." "Ugh!" cried Mr. Lorry, rather unrelenting. "Nevertheless, I am shocked at the sight of you. Now, what would I humbly offer to you, sir?" "Now, what I would humbly offer to you, sir," pursued Mr. Cruncher, "even if it was so, which I don't say it is—" "Don't prevaricate," said Mr. Lorry. "No, I will not, sir," returned Mr. Cruncher, as if nothing were further from his thoughts or practice. Which I don't say it is, what I would humbly offer to you would be this. Upon that there stool, that there bar, sets that there boy of mine, brought up and growed up to be a man, what will errand you, message you, general light job you, till your heels is where your head is, if such should be your wishes. If what was so, which I still don't say it is, for I will not prevaricate to you, sir, let that there boy keep his father's place, and take care of his mother. Don't blow up that boy's father. Do not do it, sir, and let that father go into line of the regular digging, and make amends for which he would have undug, if it was so, by digging of 'em in with a will, and with conwictions respecting the future keeping of 'em safe, that Mr. Lorry, said Mr. Cruncher, wiping his forehead with his arm, as an announcement that he had arrived at the peroration of his discourse, is what I would respectfully offer to you, sir. A man don't see all this here a-going on dreadful round him in the way of subjects without heads, dear me, plentiful enough to bring the price down to portage, and hardly that without having his serious thoughts of things. And these here would be mine if it was so, entreating of you for to bear in mind that what I said just now, I up and said in the good cause, when I might have kept it back. That at least is true, said Mr. Lorry. Say no more now. It may be that I shall yet stand your friend, if you deserve it, and repent in action, not in words. I want no more words. Mr. Cruncher knuckled his forehead as Sidney Carton and the spy returned from the dark room. "Adieu, Mr. Barsad," said the former. "Our arrangement thus made, you have nothing to fear from me." He sat down in a chair on the hearth, over against Mr. Lorry. When they were alone, Mr. Lorry asked him what had he done, or what he had done. "Not much. If it should go ill with the prisoner, I have ensured access to him once." Mr. Lorry's countenance fell. "It was all I could do," said Carton. "To propose too much would be to put this man's head under the axe, and, as he himself said, nothing worse could happen to him if he were denounced. It was obviously the weakness of the position. There was no help for it." "But access to him," said Mr. Lorry. "If it should go ill before the tribunal, will not save him." "I never said it would." Mr. Lorry's eyes gradually sought the fire. His sympathy with his darling and the heavy disappointment of this second arrest gradually weakened them. He was an old man now, overborne with anxiety of late, and his tears fell. "You are a good man, my friend," said Carton, in an altered voice. "Forgive me if I notice that you are affected. I could not see my father weep and sit by careless. I could not respect your sorrow more if you were my father. You are free from that misfortune, however." Though he said the last words with a slip into his usual manner, there was a true feeling of respect both in his tone and in his touch that Mr. Lorry, who had never seen the better side of him, was wholly unprepared for. He gave him his hand, and Carton gently pressed it. "To return to poor Darnay," said Carton, "don't tell her of this interview or this arrangement. It would not enable her to go to see him. She might think it was contrived, in case of the worst, to convey to him the means of anticipating the sentence." Mr. Lorry had not thought of that, and he looked quickly at Carton to see if it were in his mind. It seemed to be. He returned the look, and evidently understood it. "She might think 1,000 things," she said, "and any of them would only add to her trouble." Okay, this is Carton. "She might think 1,000 things," he said, "and any of them would only add to her trouble. Don't speak of me to her. As I said to you when I first came, I had better not see her. I can put my hand out to do any little helpful work for her that my hand can find to do. Without that, you are going to her, I hope? She must be very desolate tonight." "I am going now, directly." "I am glad of that. She has such a strong attachment to you and reliance on you. How does she look?" "Anxious and unhappy, but very beautiful." "Ah!" It was a long, grieving sound, like a sigh, almost a sob. Let's do it again. "Ah!" It was a long, grieving sound, like a sigh, almost like a sob. It attached Mr. Lorry's eyes to Carton's face, which he turned to the fire. A light or a shade, the old gentleman could not have said which, passed from it as swiftly as a change will sweep over a hillside on a wild, bright day, and he lifted his foot to put back one of the little flaming logs, which was tumbling forward. He wore a white riding coat and top boots, then in vogue, and the light of the fire touching their light surfaces made him look very pale, with his long brown hair, all untrimmed, hanging loose about him. His indifference to fire was sufficiently remarkable to elicit a word of remonstrance from Mr. Lorry. His boot was still upon the hot embers of the flaming log when it had broken under the weight of his foot. I forgot it, he said. Mr. Lorry's eyes were again attracted to his face, taking note of the wasted air which clouded the naturally handsome features, and having the expression of prisoners' faces fresh in mind, he was strongly reminded of that expression. "And your duties here have drawn to an end, sir," said Carton, turning to him. "Yes, I was telling you last night when Lucy came in so unexpectedly. I have at length done all that I can do here. I hoped to have left them in perfect safety, and then to have quitted Paris. I have my leave to pass. I was ready to go." They were both silent. "Yours is a long life to look back upon, sir," said Carton wistfully. "I am in my 78th year." "You have been useful all your life, steadily and constantly occupied, trusted, respected, and looked up to. I have been a man of business ever since I have been a man. Indeed, I may say that I was a man of business when a boy. See what a place you fill at 78. How many people will miss you when you leave it empty?" "A solitary old bachelor," answered Mr. Lorry, shaking his head. "There is nobody to weep for me." "How can you say that? Wouldn't she weep for you? Wouldn't her child?" Yes, thank God. I didn't quite mean what I said." "It is a thing to thank God for, is it not?" Surely. "If you could say, with truth to your own solitary heart tonight, I have secured myself the love and attachment, the gratitude or respect of no human creature, I have won myself a tender place in no regard, I have done nothing good or serviceable to be remembered by, your 78 years would be 78 heavy curses, would they not?" "You say truly, Mr. Carton. I think they would be." Sidney turned his eyes again upon the fire, and, after a silence of a few moments, said, "I should like to ask you, as your childhood seemed far off, do the days when you sat at your mother's knee seem days of very long ago?" Responding to his softened manner, Mr. Lorry answered, 20 years back, yes. At this time of my life, no. For as I draw closer and closer to the end, I travel in the circle, nearer and nearer to the beginning. It seems to be one of the kind smoothings and preparings of the way. My heart is touched now by many remembrances that had long fallen asleep, of my pretty young mother, and I so old, and by many associations of the days when what we call the world was not so real to me, and my faults were not confirmed to me. "I understand the feeling," exclaimed Carton, with a bright flush. "And you are the better for it." "I hope so." Carton terminated the conversation here by rising to help him on with his outer coat. "But you," said Mr. Lorry, reverting to the theme, "you are young." "Yes,